Hey folks, Anthony here. Wanted to give you a short message before this episode. One, this episode is very long and we go on a lot of tangents. So whether it's in the YouTube video or in the description of the podcast below, I will provide timestamps with various topics of conversation we have. So if you're not interested in one, you can bounce around because we do go off on a few crazy tangents in this episode. And I know not all of them are going to be to everyone's taste to want to listen to us waffle on about a specific topic or another. Secondly, I would like to extend an additional large thank you to our guest, Greg Perry, and I would like to dedicate this episode on behalf of the Best Care Anywhere team to the memory of Greg's father, Chris Perry, who passed away shortly before we recorded this episode. So if you have a drink with you or a smoke with you, raise it up for Chris, and thank you again to Greg for taking some time to join us on the podcast, and I hope you had a good time with us, and I hope that we were able to take your mind off things for a little bit. With that, please enjoy the episode.
And now, direct from North Korea, here he is for the 6th hit week. 5 o'clock Charlie, his airplane, and his astigmatism.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Best Care Anywhere podcast. I am your host, Anthony, and with me, as always, a man who makes me touch myself, usually by rubbing my temples in frustration. It's Ethan.
I want my stunned silence to tell the listeners just how deeply uncomfortable I am.
I read that today, and I'm like, that's the intro? That's the intro for Ethan. And a little bit more appropriate of an intro, given the episode we're watching. Here he is, our guest, direct from Northern California, Greg Perry, his airplane, and his crippling cigar addiction. Greg, how are you?
Well, guys, thank you for having me on the program. And, as you know from being the technical director on my show, the crippling cigar addiction is entirely true.
This is a man who, when he learned one of his favorite cigar lines was no longer available would no longer be manufactured due to a warehouse fire. I genuinely believe, Greg, that you are the biggest warehouser of Cadwell cigars right now. I genuinely believe that.
I've lost count on how many boxes.
Yeah, the factory burned down, so anytime he sees Cadwell cigars for sale, he buys them. And how many, you've lost count? What was the last count you remember?
40 boxes.
Oh, Lord.
So you're telling me the factory burned down and they ceased operations. Like, what's the problem? The cigars were going to get turned to ash one way or another.
That's true. No. That's a good point. But it literally is probably my number one or number two on my top 5 list. And the factory did unfortunately burn, but they were going to be discontinued at some point anyway. It just was way faster than any of us expected. And so, yeah, I was ruining people's lives on Cigar Bid, buying everyone I can get my hands on.
So we might have to work out a little care package to Kansas so Ethan can try the last SAR.
I can do that.
Then be upset that you're eventually going to corner the market and extort him for everything he's worth. But
I have cornered the market, so yeah, he can pay up.
Mind you, I'm worth 3 stolen road signs and a car that doesn't run. So,
that's his entire liquid net worth right now. So.
I'll accept payment in road signs. That's fine.
Oh, great!
Oh no. You have just launched Ethan on a rash of thefts that no state trooper can stop.
Legally, I'm required to interject and say that they are not thefts.
He's borrowing them. He'll put them back. So in case you guys couldn't tell, our guest today is Greg Perry, one of the hosts of the Beyond the Humidor podcast, a cigar podcast for the rest of us. He, along with my dad and mutual friend Scott Robinson, sit around every other week, talk about cigars with the same fervor and insanity that we talk about MASH. So those worlds are crossing today. Timelines are colliding. Plasmas are oozing. And we're here now. So,
and hopefully we'll try not to bore everybody.
Oh, like I said before we started recording, we had to push this recording date back a little bit, which gave me more time to do more research. So I'm sure we will bore everyone. But let's be honest, the episode we're talking about today, we could talk about it for 4.5 hours, and I don't think anyone could be bored because this is a ridiculously funny episode.
I agree.
But before we get to that, just now that we've gotten the weird introductions out of the way, how's everyone doing? It's finally getting hot in California. Per the tradition started at the very founding of this podcast, let me quickly we haven't done this in a while. Is California on fire.com. Yes, California is on fire. So, praise be, the status quo has continued. California's on fire. It's hot. I'll quickly ask Ethan, because you shared some stories. Did anyone blow their hand off at 4th of July this year in Kansas?
No, it got rained out.
Okay, true, but you did tell me, and I would like you to share for the podcast, what did you do in lieu of a large amount of fireworks? Because I believe you mentioned watching the crazy people that were still trying to launch fireworks in the rain, while also watching the ridiculous lightning storm. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is true, and it's not really something that I can fully describe and have it do any justice. I'm just going to tell you guys that if there was ever a reason to go to the Midwest, it's to watch the lightning storms roll across the plains. And when you have these guys spend a month or two's worth of paychecks on fireworks, they're going to light the fuckers off. It's not a matter of weather. It's a matter of, bush light, I suppose. So just find yourself an overlook and enjoy it. And don't blow your hand off.
And I think he's right. That is literally the only reason to visit the Midwest. And I mean, that's like a iffy reason, let's be honest.
Iffy?
So,
at best. There's a reason they're called flyover states.
That's your word.
That's your. What do you call us, Ethan? What does the Midwest call us?
I am not comfortable discussing those. The
no.
ACL has very strongly condemned the use of the words I frequently hear the Western states called.
Oh my.
The ACLU, rather.
The ACLU, there we go.
Not the ACL.
Well, we're just going to hop, skip, and jump right over that then. So, before we delve into 5 o'clock Charlie, again, the pros and cons of recording later are people have the opportunity to share things that I see and want to talk about on the show. So, Ethan and Greg, but mostly Ethan, because I know this will annoy Ethan the most. Remember how last week we talked about Tuttle, and then we said, nope, season 1's over. We're going to talk about season 2, and season 1's in the past, so we're not going to talk about season 1 anymore.
You son of a bitch.
Are we going to talk about Tuttle?
So, Edwina.
Oh, no.
So this article got shared by one of the mutual people that I have found in the circle of MASH people online. This is the MASH historian. Again, I've said this before on the podcast. I thought I was a nerd about MASH because I'm a millennial and had very, very few people as a reference to how nerdy you can be about the show. I am not even in the top 100. Like, I don't even have words to describe how deep some people have gone and research and stuff for the show. But this guy, the MASH historian, he has archives of old letters, old scripts, some unused scripts, interviews with cast members that are no longer with us that are super hard to find. He's got all sorts of stuff over on his website. And one of the articles that came out, and I won't read the whole article because obviously you should go to his website and read the article and engage on his thing so that he gets traffic and eyeballs on his stuff because, that's how the internet should work. But I'll quickly mention Edwina was going to be so much worse than it was. Specifically, they did the table read for the episode where, all the actors sit around with the first draft of the script and they basically play act the whole show. They read all the lines and stuff. And at the end, nobody said a thing. It was just pin drop silence at the end. And Loretta Swit eventually looked up and said, I won't do this show. And Larry Gelbart said, I understand how you feel, but remember, we're doing a show about 1952, and Loretta Swit looked at him and said, I would be uncomfortable with this even in 1952, because instead of Edwina being a klutz, she was going to be grossly overweight. Which, I don't know if that's better or worse than what we eventually got. But,
The hard part is, Anthony, we're looking through it through the lens of 2023.
Oh, yeah,
so
100%.
The lens of 2023 makes me go, yeah, that would probably be way worse and way inappropriate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even then, the article, and I'll put a link to it in the description of the podcast or the video of the podcast. But yeah, that's just one of the changes they made, and that's obviously the most like glaring change. But even at the end of the article, they mention a quote from Larry Gelbart saying, yeah, even with the changes, this is one of the episodes we're least proud of. So yeah. Just to make Ethan uncomfortable, there's some more Edwina information for everyone. Ethan, you're very quiet over there.
I don't have anything that I could possibly add that Greg didn't say. 2023 lens, and of course I'm the youngest one here. I don't even have like, oh well, in the 90s. No, I know my little sliver of time, and I can say, yikes.
That's literally, I saw this article. How I saw it was through Twitter, and I literally retweeted it like, oh, we're talking about this on the next episode just to screw with Ethan. And then I read the article and I just commented underneath. After having read the article, all I can say is, yikes, as Ethan said. So yeah, thank you, MASH historian, for furthering our distaste for Edwina. Thank you so much. And again, every time I bring this up and say talk about the episode Edwina, I do always want to give the caveat that Arlene Galanka, fabulous. She was excellent as Edwina, but my God, that episode just confuses me. But anyway, on to other things, because weirdly there was a lot of MASH news since our last recording. Jamie Farr has turned 89. Good for Jamie Farr.
Good God.
Yeah. Don't think about how old characters and actors from your favorite shows are, Greg. Don't think about it. But yeah, he's still going strong. He and Loretta Swit still go out to like Comic-Cons and conventions and stuff and meet fans and sign stuff, and they're still kicking butt, so good for them. Yes.
That is the only reason I would go to a con.
Dude, Ethan, no joke, if I found out that they were going to be at Kansas City Comic-Con, or like even San Diego would be close enough, I'd be doing it. But San Diego or Sacramento's little comic convention they have, I would 100% organize a way to get you out there or me out there just to go. I don't even want to like get something signed is like a bonus. I just want to look at someone from the MASHcast and just say like, hey, thank you. You're cool. You're awesome. This thing you did still affects me today. Praise be unto you, and walk away. Like, that's all I want. But yeah. So yeah, Jamie Farr, happy belated birthday. We're late to the party. Keep kicking butt. And it's so cool because even the Toledo Mud Hens have like adopted him, and they even tweeted out happy birthday to him. He's their quote favorite son.
The Toledo Mud Hens that's actually a real AAA ball club.
Yes. So Jamie Farr and the character he plays, Klinger. Again, Ethan, I sometimes forget that you may not have all knowledge.
They
make Klinger very from Toledo, like passionately from Toledo.
Okay.
He wears a Mud Hens jersey through most of the back half of the seasons of the show. So Toledo, he loves Toledo, and because of that, Toledo loves him. Like, there's literally, I saw someone posted a picture on his birthday on one of the MASH pages of, there's like, I don't want to call it a memorial plaque, but because he's not dead, but there's in one of the parks, they have a little plaque dedicated to him and kind of explaining he's from this town. He went on to do this, and this, most notably Klinger from MASH. Like, there's a little shrine to Jamie Farr in Toledo somewhere. And we're eventually going to hear about his favorite eatery and a bunch of other places in Toledo that Klinger frequents are all real places. Paco's Hungarian Hot Dogs is still a real business today. Probably because he mentioned it on MASH, to be honest. Like, it gets a lot of foot traffic from people that are like, oh, hey, MASH. So,
I don't know, though. I don't know if that's a reason to visit Toledo, but I'm in.
I mean,
if Ohio was a real place, maybe, but
oh no. No, most I think with the exception of Hawkeye's character, most of the hometowns are real places, because Crabapple Cove is not a real place, but it's based off a lot of coastal places in Maine. But Ottumwa, Iowa, Mill Valley, most of the places we're going to hear about actually exist. So I totally don't have a road trip to all the MASH hometowns saved in my Garmin GPS base camp future trips folder. Don't worry about it.
Oh no, I'm pretty sure you do.
I'm 100. Yeah, you don't want to know the mileage on that trip. The only other non-specifically episode bits of news I want to talk about is it's gone around the internet for the last week and a half, and we're going to be the last people to talk about it just by nature of the fact we record every 2 weeks. So Alan Alda has hinted at it for a little bit on a couple of talk shows he's been on, but he announced a couple weeks ago that at the end of this month, he will be putting up for auction the boots and dog tags he wore for the entire series run as Hawkeye. And the money is going to go to the Stony Brook University Center for Communicating Science, which is something he is very passionate about. He helps run that program and promote it. But yeah, there's not many props from shows or movies I would want. And weirdly, the boots and dog tags are not one of them, because my dumbass should not have something that iconic or special in my possession. Because my dumbass would lose them.
I just think about this going, I am too poor to be able to bid on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to know what the starting bid for the dog tags I read is?
You don't. You really don't.
You really don't.
No, by all means, please tell me how poor I am.
10 grand for the dog tags. Is what I saw. I don't know if that's confirmed, but the starting bid is 10 grand, which means, and Ethan mentioned this, they're definitely going to go for 25,000. I bet
if maybe more than that, I'd be willing to bet to top 100.
Yeah, I bet they easily 50 to 70, possibly 100, and I would bet there is a small sliver of a chance that some super fan who appreciates where the money is going also can easily drop 150, without question. It's just a matter of who ends up bidding at the auction. So yeah, the boots that have, because they're a prop department thing, they have the character's name in them, Hawkeye written in them. The dog tags do not say Benjamin Franklin Pierce. They are from two different gentlemen who served in the latter half of World War II, and their dog tags just kind of got rotated into the Fox prop department after they passed away in the 70s. So no special Benjamin Franklin Pierce dog tags, sadly. But no, the Alan Alda has said in numerous interviews that he feels that he really gets into the character once he gets the outfit on, specifically the shoes of the character for some reason. So the boots have very significant meaning to Alda, which that in and of itself, and the stories he's told about keeping them for so long, just that makes them priceless to me. But the fact that they're not one of 50 pairs, they're the pair. That's it. So yeah, that's crazy. Which prompted me to want to ask the question to you guys real quick. Is there a prop from MASH that if you had, a blank check, maybe not a blank check because that gets crazy, but if you could choose one prop from MASH to have, what would it be?
That's easy for me.
Oh,
that's easy for me. There's actually two, and yes, I need a blank check at this point.
Yeah.
I want the airplane we're going to discuss. I would love to have that because that would just be fun.
In North Korean Air Force paint job?
Why not? No one's going to know what that is here, except for a few select few of us. We'll be good. And then the other prop, if you remember, and I'm sorry, I can't pull the episode name off the top of my head, but it was in the latter seasons because Sherman Potter was the CO. if you remember, he buys a lighter. They move the spirit post, and that lighter stops working. Well, that lighter's a Zippo, and I'd love to have that.
Yeah, it's a little. You've seen these, Ethan. They're the little gag lighters that look like little pistols.
Oh yeah.
You pull the trigger and it flips up. That would be a cool one. You mentioned there's like two ways I could go with this answer. I could go with like deep sentimental answer, or like really deep cut. No one would know what that prop is. And you said the spirit post. I'm like, what if that spirit post is kicking around somewhere? Like such an obscure prop, but if you know, you know.
You remember, my friend. I think I've watched this series as much as you have, at least.
I know my answer, that's for sure.
What's your answer?
Trapper's hat. The straw cowboy style with the red silk wrapped around it.
The little feather, the little like finch feather in it.
I am making my own look-alike. I've decided that a matter of when is all that remains.
Very nice. For someone that has watched this, yes.
Am I remembering on that hat? Didn't that start as Spear Chucker's hat?
Oh God, I don't know.
It was if I remember correctly, it was Spear Chuckers, and then I think Hawkeye wears it in Chief Surgeon Who upon his throne with his toilet scepter. And then I think it eventually migrated to Trapper.
Yeah, because I think everyone in the swamp has some sort of straw-esque hat at some point. But yeah, no, that specific red silk one, again, season 1, the props rotated around a bunch, but they eventually landed with the specific characters they landed. But yeah, I knew I was going to ask you guys this question, and I've been thinking about it for 2 days now. It's a hard choice because, again, there's part of me that wants to get the obscure prop. Like, one of my favorite things that I had hanging in my house in the kitchen when I lived up in Colfax was a poster for Genco Pura Olive Oil Company, from our family to yours, Corleone, Sicily. Not everyone is going to recognize that for what it is, but the people who do, I love that. I love little hints at stuff like that. So part of me would want to get the obscure props, and one of the ones that came to mind is that in, again, one of the middle seasons that we haven't gotten to yet, Frank and Margaret want to get Colonel Potter an anniversary gift, so they have one of the local Koreans carve a bust of him.
Oh no!
but he accidentally carves him so he looks slightly Asian.
Yes.
But other than that, with the exception of the fact that it looks like an Asian Harry Morgan, it's a pretty good bust of Harry Morgan.
True.
But yeah, there's so many little incidental props in the background. But to even have, like, if they unearthed a box that was like a bunch of the like secondhand surgical equipment, and they said they had a way to authenticate that it was from the MASH set, I'd even take like a hemostat. Like, just something from the actual set would be cool. But
well, remember when they dropped in the Officers Club too, you had the MASH 4077. It was not a flag; it was a board, and it was in the back of the
it was like a big MDO board.
Club.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Shit.
And all the signatures on it are, I believe, like the cast, the crew, the camera people. Like, don't quote me on that, but that would be an awesome prop too. But yeah, there's almost no end to the number of props you could name that I would be more than happy to have. And then you have like the
one. There's another one that features in this episode. One of Henry Blake's dolls.
Oh, the little like kimono dolls on the desk.
Yes.
Oh no. God, yeah.
Hey, I just got her, and you broke the arm.
There's man, we're going off on a tangent, but now that I'm thinking about it more, there's so many like one-off. I could just rattle them off. The horizontal pinstripe suit.
Oh yes.
The crushed French horn, which if David Ogden Stiers didn't take that off set, I'm kind of ashamed of him. But the flattened French horn would be one. The custom French horn he gets made with no mouthpiece. Like, I'm sure, you know what? Why am I thinking of these? Let's crowdsource. Audience, please share with us what MASH prop you would love. Like, give us like your like actual pick, like true, like the boots or the dog tags. Then give us your like wild, I want this prop because no one else but me will know what it is prop from MASH. God, yeah.
How about Margaret's whip?
What?
I love that Ethan doesn't know what half of these are.
Excuse the fuck out of you? What do you mean?
Margaret gets a whip. Don't ask questions.
That I think, Anthony, if I'm right, that's season 4 or 5 because Frank's still there.
Oh,
yeah,
that ruins so many fantasies, but makes so many more.
All you need to know is that Margaret loves fine leather. That's all you
Margaret
need to know.
does love fine leather.
Well, oh boy. See,
I won't ever be able to look Loretta Swit in the eye if I ever meet her.
Nope. I found what Ethan's favorite prop is going to be. Say it, Greg.
The little pearl-handled pistol that she gives Frank when they go across Rainbow Bridge.
The little ladies' muff pistol. Yeah. No, I thought you were going to say the pearl-handled Colt Navy.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah,
the General's gun.
That's going to be Ethan's favorite prop, and we're not even there yet. That's like 6 seasons away.
I would have also accepted Cowboys, pistols, and belt.
Ooh, okay. Yes. Cowboys, pistols, belt, and hat. Yeah.
Or Hawkeye's 1911 when he goes on that.
No, really? Oh, you have no idea.
There's an episode where Hawkeye has a gun in his hand, which to Ethan right now is a mind-boggling sentence.
Well, because as the audience and you guys will both know, I get horny over the 1911.
Go on your speech.
Listen, when John Moses Browning rose up out of the Atlantic Ocean, he had 2 things in mind: the world's best pistol and 45 ACP, and he combined them into the only good thing that has ever come out of Ohio.
Ethan usually refers to the Browning 1911 as God's chosen firearm and caliber. So
yes, although a high point, like a genuine high point, that would be pretty cool. I'm not
high power, not high point, for God's sake.
High point, high power, doesn't matter. It's not a 1911. I'm trying to throw you a bone.
Ethan want big gun.
Yeah.
Look, when you can melt a high point on a home stove, that's a problem.
Oh no.
Well, you can do that to a Glock.
Tune in for Ethan and Greg's gun podcast coming soon.
Coming soon to a podcast channel near you.
I will take this moment because we've done it before on the show. Hi. The 3 of us are gun owners, not the crazy Second Amendment tattoo, tactical vest, AR-15 wielding at a Walmart gun owners. We're sensible, no matter. That is my biggest caveat. You know that about me, Greg. We've had this conversation.
True.
If I'm talking with strangers about guns, I unfortunately feel the need to clarify that I am not I will carry my AR-15 into the Walmart technically because the law says I can type of people. So.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. But anyway, moving forward, the last thing we got off on hello audience. Are you awake? Are you still here?
I don't know. Are they there?
I don't know. We may have lost them. But to wrap up the MASH props part of the conversation, remember we were talking about MASH props like a half hour ago?
We were?
The only other major prop of the show specific to a character that is ever auctioned before is, of course, Radar's teddy bear.
Really?
Yep. Oh boy. Yeah. Gary Berghoff.
Do we know what it sold for?
Yes, I have the figure. Remember, I said I have like 15 to 20 tabs open right now.
Can Greg and I guess before you tell us?
Yeah, I'll have you guess, but hang on. So the last time we see the bear for the last time in a very specific episode that I will not spoil, and then Gary Berghoff took it with him at the end of his time on the show. In MASH, the bear shows up again, but the actual prop bear that Radar uses went offset with Gary, I believe. The stories around it are kind of vague sometimes, but essentially it sold at auction on July 29th of 2005. I'll give you this price because there's another auction price later. It sold for $11,800. It eventually made its way to the Smithsonian, where it was on display in the MASH set. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stories of what happened, but essentially the last time it was auctioned was March 27th, 2014. How much do you think it went for? And it was the same bear that Gary used from when we see it in season 1 all the way up until season 8.
So my line of thinking is if in what you said 2008 it went for 11.8, then it appreciated in value. So I'm going to go with a stiff and sturdy 15 smackaroonies.
Okay.
Nah, I think you're a little on the light side. I'd go more 25 to 30.
Ethan is going to be the person I take to Las Vegas with me. $14,307. And it included a notarized letter from Gary Berghoff talking about some of the history of the bear, which he personally named. Gary, personally named it Tiger.
Oh, but that's such a radar thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that the bear has a name in the show. I think Radar almost always just calls it his teddy bear. His bear.
Yeah, I don't ever remember it being called a name.
Yeah.
I'll call it plenty of names if you guys want.
Oh, no, please don't. Yeah. And the last thing I'll mention, because if I don't, some of our fans will be annoyed, because I know they shared this with me just to get a reaction from me. Long story short, it was a post was shared with me from one of the various MASH Facebook pages or whatever that I always low-key complain about because the same 8 jokes are made 1,000 times in the comments. You know, my favorite doctor is Tuttle, ha ha ha, Bach, LOL, all that. And it was purposely shared with me to get me annoyed. But we had a really good conversation in the comments of that post between me and a bunch of the other fans of the podcast and other MASH podcast hosts about why is it, and Greg, this question is going to be more directed at you because you are familiar with the show as a whole more than Ethan is. Why is it that, do you think people have literal internet fistfights over one actor over the other, one season over the early seasons versus later seasons? Why are people so gung-ho for saying, for example, one of the common ones is Trapper is so much better than BJ and I will not compromise on that thought one bit, or season 1 through 3 is the good part of the show and then they ruined it in the later. Why are people so because the thing I responded with is I'm a fan of MASH. Period. All of it. The funny, the dramatic, the serious, the goofy. I think personally that the show became what it was because it had to adapt and change and over time, and that's what made it so good. But as another person who has seen more of the show, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I can equate this to an argument that also falls into another series of mine that I highly enjoy, that I think I got you beat on because I can, but
yeah,
let's face it, human nature is to argue. We just do that. Our point has to be right. The other person's point has to be wrong. It's just the way it is. That being said, when you look at a series, MASH is one of the prime examples because it is a single show that ran for its 11 seasons, I believe, and its movie, and that's the end of it. Except if you want to talk about After MASH, but that's another series and show probably for you later on. But the arguments are not dissimilar from Star Trek fans who don't like a particular character, or out of the multitude of series that they have created now, some like certain ones, others don't, like myself liking, you know, the Next Generation DS9, not liking Voyager and all the rest of them that have come after it. It's inherent nature to argue on that, and you all have your particular cast favorites of the series. Obviously, Hawkeye sticks around. We lose others. People get rotated in and out. People get killed. People die in reality, and they have to be covered up in the show. So it changes the dynamic. I think what makes it more important, as you have put as a MASH fan, how does the dynamic change, and how do they adapt to make it palatable, pleasing, pleasurable, and then fanatic for all of us? And MASH has been one of the series that truly does that well. You know, you replace characters all the time, and you make it better because they have their own quirks and their own jokes. So, you know, I bring that down to, it's just the nature of people to argue over something that causes that, because I'm kind of in your camp. Yes, there are characters I don't like, but I'm a fan of the show as a whole. And even though there are things that may be unpalatable to me, Edwina being one of them, that does not detract from what they did and how much success they were able to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Ethan,
I hope that answers your question.
I think that answers it very nicely. Ethan, I know that you're still newer to the show, but I don't even know what question I want to ask you. What are your thoughts as someone who's coming into the show and has kind of heard me and Greg and others say, and like Mike when we had him on, mention that, yeah, there's a lot of passionate feeling for one season versus another, versus this character versus this character. Does that concern you going forward as someone who's watching the show for the first time? Or are you more intrigued to be like, what the hell are they talking about?
I always think it's cool when a series, TV show or otherwise, can spawn so many dedicated fans, and I think it always just really comes down to what resonates with people, and because people are so different jokes and different characters are going to resonate differently from them. I can already probably tell you, not knowing when he comes in, not knowing what the fuck is going to happen to anyone, I'm probably going to like Trapper more than BJ. I love the guy.
You are the closest real world equivalent to Trapper I have met. So that tracks.
I'm just telling you now. And, send your hate mail to shavethosecorneas.gov, but
we're a year and a half into this podcast. Stop with shave your corneas.
It's just, people get attached to different different aspects of the show, and that's fine. And if they want to defend them, that's fine. But it really just comes down to what you pick and choose to enjoy, in my humble opinion, at least.
And I responded to all this very kind of the same way Greg did, very democratically. I basically said, I love MASH, all of it. I neither agree nor disagree with the big reasons or base reasons people like or dislike various eras of the show or specific characters / actors. MASH, by part fate and part design, had to / was allowed to grow and evolve with new characters and sentiments as the show / war dragged on. Wayne, McLean, Larry, and Gary, for their own personal reasons that were nearly always going to be the same, left the show. Spoilers, Ethan, sorry. And that was always going to be the case unless a lot of the writing and background stuff in the real world changed. But in exchange, we got Mike, David, Harry, and then Bill Christopher and Jamie Farr got to step up to the plate, and we got interesting stories out of them in exchange. So,
it's interesting because we're talking about, the fans hating. I don't think there is one absolutely hated, despised character in the Star Trek universe that I don't think MASH ever achieved that level of hatred, which I think is a good thing. So, I think the show did a really good job of taking the time period and rotating actors through because of whatever issues. I'm sure you'll talk about the Trapper issue at the end of the third season, but I don't think they ever made it so characters became that hated, even when the show was running in regular air versus now where we see it in syndication and Hulu and all that other.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of the reasons people don't like specific characters, I would argue, because they're human beings with character flaws, like everybody on the planet has.
Yeah.
Like the reasons people like, I can't stand Hawkeye. Good. Hawkeye at some times is a piece of shit, and you shouldn't tolerate him. That's the whole point, is that sometimes Hawkeye's a piece of shit. Or, like I've said, there are some times where I can enjoy Frank or see Frank's being a decent human being for once, because he's not a one-dimensional character yet.
You brought up a great point, because there are so many times where they designed Frank's character to be hated, and it was really nice to see the moments where they did bring him down to earth and make him be a human being for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And like the again, I keep using him as the example because he seems to be the later season's punching bag. Mike Farrell is BJ Honeycutt. You needed to bring in someone who was dedicated to their family because we had just had 3.5 seasons of adultery nonstop. It was nice to get someone hit between him and Colonel Potter, two gentlemen who were devoted to their family life. But the trade-off is, yeah, he took it too far sometimes and was a whiny, irritating piece of crap because he's a human being with character flaws. Like,
Right.
and that's the thing people latch onto is like, oh, BJ's so whiny, but yeah, I don't know. I could keep talking about it, but then I was pushed by our favorite Twitter follower, Mike Jameson. He's like, that's way too rational and adult for this platform. So he encouraged me to stop being so mature because it's Twitter. So I responded with, and this is said in sort of jest, with like a drop or two of how I actually feel. I said, all right then, disliking the later seasons in their entirety because they are too serious demonstrates a level of immaturity and unwillingness to confront the harsh truths of life, like death, loss, and questioning one's purpose and faith. Likewise, being not disliking the earlier seasons. Oh, where is it? Hang on. I may have gone too hard. Disliking the earlier seasons shows a lack of an ability to laugh at oneself and find humor in dark times. Like he got me a little upset. But
Just a little bit, Anthony.
That was mostly in jest, putting on my Twitter rage hat just for the fun of it.
It's
but
still
yeah,
the most rational Twitter response I've ever heard.
It is, and you make a good point because you do have to find humor in dark times. It's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. But MASH is a dramedy, whether you like it or not. It is going to be goofy at times where it maybe shouldn't. It's going to be overly serious at times. Yeah, it's in a war zone, people. Like, relax. But okay, we've screamed about MASH for like 40 minutes, and we haven't even discussed the episode we came here to discuss.
And then we have episodes like this one that don't fall into either one.
I can tell you, I can give you a hint right now. There is no controversy with this episode. I think everyone listening is in agreement about this episode, which is good. Now that we've discussed controversy, let's discuss.
Well, before we get into that, I think we have a tradition to uphold.
Oh God, what's that?
Greg, hi. You're new.
Hello.
What's your experience with MASH?
Yeah, we forgot our key question. How did you come to... We just went right off into guns and props and all sorts of stuff. Before we get into the episode, which I've said 5 times already.
Edit those out.
How did you... We ask every guest, how did you become a fan of MASH? Because no secret, Ethan and I are millennial children. We are young. Greg is not as young, so his experience is going to be different with MASH. How did you come to become as engrossed in the show as I am?
Funny you say that because I sit on the cusp of Gen X and millennial, so I don't know which to classify. I know which I'm classifying myself as, so I would technically be a Gen X if you want to argue that point. But it was one of those things where I can't really tell you how I got into it because I can't remember. I just remember at some point I was introduced to this program, whether it was by my late father or whether it was by grandparents. I don't remember where this came up, but I remember, it's always been part of my life for as long as I can remember. And, it was before streaming services became a big thing for you two millennials. It was the box set on DVDs, and it took me probably, 4 or 5 years of my working career at that time buying the box set of DVDs. That's back when I worked for Circuit City that long ago, if you believe it. And
oh my goodness,
that's the way it was. Now I have it on my fingertips on my tablet, phone, or computer with Hulu. And
Grandpa, what's a Circuit City? I'm sorry, I had to get that in there.
It was this store, very much like Best Buy.
A bunch of our audience just cried out in terror, and then we're suddenly silent.
It was a store, kind of like Best Buy, but better and red and white, not blue and yellow. Wasn't full of douchebags, but I digress. You know, it's a show that I don't care how crappy of a day, how pissed off I am, I can, turn on a MASH episode, and I've seen them all, as I'm sure you have, Anthony, hundreds of times. I still laugh at the jokes. I find something new periodically that I haven't seen or have overlooked. So this series really transcends time. And there's a whole new generation that's still getting to see it now because it's on Hulu, particularly with people like you that are making the podcast and sharing it with people. It adds a new element. But, it brings to mind that night that you and I and Craig, not the bot, my brother Craig, were in the lounge during a certain time in our lives when lockdowns were mandatory, that we were playing with your, for lack of a better word, MASH Trivia Pursuit set.
Yeah.
And Roger was blown away that you could rattle off a question and Craig and I and you could pick up an answer of the most obscure thing.
And not just pick up the answer, know when the question was wrong.
And discuss the episode and why it's wrong.
Oh my God. Yeah, for the really hardcore, for example, I'll have to send you the picture, Greg, after this, but one of our fans sent a picture of his exorbitant MASH collection he has a couple of scripts and old magazine clippings and signed pictures, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, for those of you that are collecting MASH stuff, keep your eyes open at your local antique or thrift stores for the MASH trivia game. And I can't remember what company. It's not Trivia Pursuit or Hasbro. It's one of the kind of off-brand companies. But I have the whole set except for one. I'm missing one of the point value parts, sadly. But whatever. Oh well. But yeah, ridiculous fun. It is. Some of the questions, man, are even us three were like, man, that's a deep cut question. Holy cow. And
then one of us pulls the answer out of our rear end, and Roger's just going, how the hell?
Yeah. So yeah, and I think you said something very pertinent. There is a MASH episode for any mood that you're in. Do you need to laugh? There's episodes like 5 O'Clock Charlie. Do you need kind of a melancholy episode? There's episodes for that. Do you need, and I'll be honest, I felt this way some nights. Are there some days where you come home and I just need to feel emotion and be maybe a little upset? There's definitely MASH episodes for that. It's I don't think anyone listening to this podcast currently is blown away by this revelation that MASH is a good show. I think we're all in agreement of that, but
yeah. I don't think they'd be listening to you if they weren't in disagreement with you.
All right. I'm not going to say it again and not actually start discussing the episode. Now on to the actual episode that we're discussing this week.
Can we talk about that now?
Yes, we can talk. I warned you yesterday this is going to be an episode because it just happened at the perfect moment when there was a bunch of MASH news. But the episode we are finally discussing is Season 2, Episode 2, 5 O'Clock Charlie, that aired on September 22nd, 1973. Something we haven't done in a while is point out a event in history that would kind of give us a time frame for when this occurred or when this aired. And I didn't have a really good example to pull, so I just pulled one that I knew Ethan and I at least would be familiar with. A few days before this episode aired, Ethan, was the death of one Graham Parsons in the Joshua Tree National Forest. He died. He is a singer-songwriter, formerly a member of the Byrds, died from a combination of morphine and alcohol while at Joshua Tree Inn in Yucca, California, which in and of itself is kind of a throwaway, interesting factoid. The more interesting factoid is what his road manager and crew did afterwards. They hijacked his body from LAX before it could get shipped back to New Orleans and followed through on Graham's final death wishes of being cremated in Joshua Tree Park. So
that's how I want to die.
Just be cremated by your friends on federal land?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. The only reason Ethan and I know that is because we watched the same YouTube video about it. But yeah, I'll have to send you the video because it's a ridiculous story, Greg. But yeah, Graham Parsons passed away 3 days before this episode aired. That's my well-known historical fact to put the show in a time frame that everyone can understand. I'm sure everyone appreciates and understands that reference to random American singer-songwriter folklore.
Everyone we care about.
Not to date myself, but you do realize eventually you will catch up to episodes for when I was born.
Eventually, yes. But today is not that day.
No.
So yeah, it aired September 22nd, 1973. Written by Laurence Marks and Keith Walker. Directed by Norman Tokar. Laurence Marks we have heard many times on the show going forward. I believe last episode I mentioned that Jackie Cooper is the most prevalent director for this season. Laurence Marks is one of this season's most prevalent writers, so we're going to see a lot of him. Some of his previous episodes are The Moose, Yankee Doodle Doctor, Love Story, Sticky Wicket, so episodes that we have enjoyed. The other writer, Keith Walker, the two most notable acting and writing credits I saw for him are Mr. Walsh from The Goonies, he played that character, and he wrote for basically anything you see that has the Free Willy title. He was one of the main writers for Free Willy, which I remember having on VHS growing up.
Just brought back unpleasant childhood memories of movies.
Free Willy. Yeah. Let that sink in for you. Have you ever watched Free Willy, Ethan?
I try not to think about it very much.
Well, congratulations, you're thinking about it now.
Don't torture him by having him watch that.
The next episode of MASH will be a special bonus episode where we watch Free Willy. No.
Next Sunday I'll be dead.
Month?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. The director Norman Tokar has a couple of interesting credits. This first one I've heard it mentioned on other MASH podcasts, and I feel like I would be breaking some sort of like mummy's curse if I also didn't share it. Norman Tokar was director for a film called The Cat from Outer Space, 1978, which starred, wait for it, Harry Morgan and McLean Stevenson, both commanding officers from the 4077th. Which, I don't know what makes me want to watch that movie more. The fact that we get to see Harry Morgan and McLean Stevenson together, or the fact that the film is called The Cat from Outer Space.
Movie night at the shop, Anthony?
I think that might have to be a thing.
Yeah.
The other one, and I specifically put this movie credit on here because I know that all three of us, at one time, were young boys who read books and watched movies, and were also avid outdoorsmen. And I know that no matter how many of us may not want to admit to it, we have all cried to this piece of media. He was the director for the 1974 film adaptation of Where the Red Fern Grows.
Fuck him.
Believe it or not, I have never seen it, never read it.
You know, that actually surprises me. That genuinely surprises me. Ethan clearly has read it. I have read it. I'll tell a quick story about
Where the Red Fern for you.
Oh, God. Spoiler alert, Greg. Spoiler alert, Greg. The dogs die. Sorry. Gonna throw that out there.
Of course the dog dies. Old Yeller all over again.
Dogs plural. It's even sadder than you think.
It's twice as sad.
So my mom thought this would be when we used to go to school down the road in Lincoln and live in Auburn, so we would have to do 193 every day. So my mom would go to the library and get audiobooks on cassette for the minivan. She was not ready to have 3 young boys in her minivan stuck in traffic on 193 for the end of Where the Red Fern Grows. She was not. Me and my brothers are sitting there getting childhood trauma while she's trying to drive us home from school. It's good. Honestly, it's one of those stories that, yeah, it's written for kids, but I genuinely think, Greg, get an audiobook version for your next trip up to Idaho. You will as an outdoorsman and a former child yourself, you will appreciate the story, I think. So
Yeah, no, I think I'll pass.
You'll pass on the. I'll be perfectly honest, and I do not mean this as a joke. You, as a grown man, will cry at the end of that book.
There's no shame in crying in that.
That is a good litmus test for whether someone is a real like. That's a good like. Hey, read this. You didn't cry. You're an android. Get away from me. Like,
yeah, that is one of 2 books that has made me cry.
Android's the wrong word. Asshole is the right word.
Asshole, yeah. If you didn't cry during reading or watching Where the Red Fern Grows, you are not a real human being to me. Or you are like Clint Eastwood levels of badass, no emotion. But that's a whole nother conversation. So anyway, still getting off on tangent. 5 o'clock, Charlie. Let's run through the very beginning of the episode so we can actually start talking about it. The camp is all sorts of in a commotion. Radar is placing bets, or taking bets rather, for some sort of event that is imminently occurring in the next few minutes. We hear the PA speaker announcing 3 minutes to Charlie. We have no idea what that means. Everyone's running around in a panic. So yeah, Radar is taking bets for Charlie, which we come and we get a glance around camp that Father Mulcahy is placing bets for 40 yards. We have Hawkeye and Trapper. This might be, when I picture Hawkeye and Trapper, this is Hawkeye and Trapper. This is quintessential. This is Hawkeye and Trapper's friendship for me, summarized in a 2-minute scene. You have them getting gussied up to see Charlie come do his thing. Hawkeye is in a safari hat, white scarf, and his maroon bathrobe. Trapper is in a kimono, which I believe is the same one Hawkeye wore for Edwina, just to twist the knife on Ethan a little bit. Also the inspiration for the infamous kimono dragon artwork. And he is also wearing a monocle and a Royal Tankman, what am I trying to say? United Kingdom Royal Tankers Regiment beret. I come to find out that's what he's wearing, which I don't know how he got that, but we're not going to ask questions. I don't know what else I want to say about Hawkeye and Trapper at this moment. Do you gentlemen have any opinions on this just gem of a few minutes we get with them?
I mean, well, I can't disagree with the host of a show like this, because it's true. It is quite essentially their interaction together. This sets the tone, I think, for the rest of the season 2 and for season 3 of how they behave, because as you've discussed so many times in season 1, it was a little bit frantic, mismatched, and you never knew what you were going to get on the flavor of the week. But this sets the tone going forward of how they're going to interact. And I think it also sets up the next few sequences where Frank and Margaret get involved. You know, it's 2 goofballs stuck in the chaos that is the Korean War, and it just, I think it just sets the tone for the future series.
Yeah, I think so as well. There's a lot better. Trapper and Hawkeye seem like they're on a lot more of an even footing in this episode than they have been in the past, which I know, Ethan, has been one of your critiques of how they've written Trapper, is that he seems to be very much Hawkeye's shadow as opposed to center stage with him.
Why, Reggie, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, God.
Oh, my, that was awful.
That was awful. I do love how the pip pip chitty-o, righto. Are you too sick or something? Did you have a cold?
The only logical question to ask someone who sounds vaguely British.
Yes. There goes a third of our podcast audience from Europe. All right, bye. So we have Frank and Margaret come in.
I'm used to it.
We have Frank and Margaret coming in screaming about an air raid, which, again, up to this point, we have no idea what's going on. We don't know why everyone's freaking out. Apparently an air raid is coming. Frank and Margaret are panicking, insisting that they need to take cover, that they ask, don't you realize what danger you're in? And I love the response of, Frank, you realize for us, and you will protect us. There's just no cares in the world coming from not Frank, Hawkeye and Trapper. They proceed out of the swamp to the viewing area, and I love the running gag in this episode that they keep stealing Frank's gun and replacing it with other objects. The first is a water pistol.
It gets better from here.
Which is filled with quotation mark water quotation mark, as Trapper points out. How do you know it's water?
I don't like that his base instinct whenever he draws his quote-unquote service weapon is to put his finger on his trigger.
Immediately fire it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it,
he immediately squeezes the trigger.
Up.
Which is arguably not the worst direction to fire it. Certainly not the ideal direction. Actually, no, the ideal direction would be don't touch the gun, Frank. That's the ideal direction. So Frank and Margaret run off. What? Yeah. Yes.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong in thinking this was one of the first sets where William Christopher became a regular cast member?
So here's the thing with both Jamie Farr and William Christopher. Up until I believe William Christopher is season 5 and Jamie Farr is season 6, they are day players. They do not have full service contracts until those seasons. But they, over the course of the next few seasons, they get featured more and more and more and more. They should have probably been regular contracted full-time cast like by season 4 for sure. But you know, whatever. The wheels of Hollywood turn slowly. But yeah, we do see a lot more of Klinger and Father Mulcahy going forward. But yeah, up until season 4, they are very sporadic. But so Frank and Margaret leave in a tiff, as they are to do basically every time. Just a random side note, we do get a very nice view of the swamp door, which, going back to our props conversation earlier, that would be another cool one. The OG swamp door with the paint on it would be kind of neat. But
yes,
I've seen so many people recreate it though. It's pretty.
But then don't forget that still in the background.
And the still is another one, because I think there's like 3 or 4 versions of the still too. And
there is.
While we're here, we might as well point out the signpost. Like,
oh yeah,
that's one. That's an easy one to name off. But Hawkeye and Trapper take their recliners and they toddle off, as they say, to the viewing area. We get Henry and Nurse Ginger Bayless, played by Odessa Cleveland, in surgery, discussing both the surgery and which yardage they both bet on. So we're getting an idea of what might be happening. They're betting on some sort of contest or something that is about to happen. And I'm gonna say it right here. This might be the best introduction of a one-off character in the entire series.
I agree.
There is, and it might be just because there's fanfare and like an announcement for it, but we get a bunch of one-off characters throughout the series. This is definitely the best presentation and exit of a one-off character that we don't even really see. Like, we see him just from a distance. So we see that everyone's lined up looking at an ammo dump from probably about 100 yards, 150 yards away. Radar is still taking bets at the last minute. Frank and Margaret are still urging everyone to take cover, but it's too late because we hear the quintessential engine sputter in the distance. The announcement comes over the loudspeaker that he has returned for the 6th straight week in a row, direct from North Korea, 5 o'clock Charlie, his airplane, and his astigmatism. So, what? Ethan, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes.
When we worked at the summer camp, we had this phenomenon that would happen minimum 1 time a summer, up to 4 or 5 times a summer.
Yes.
There is a regular cargo run, Greg, between probably Edwards Air Force Base and one of the depots in Nevada.
Yeah.
100%. I've heard rumors about how this happened. Either it was some guy's kid went to the camp and they know where it is now, to all sorts of rumors. But minimum one time a summer, a C-17 Galaxy would drop into the valley where Bear River Reservoir is and run the canyon, basically, and then fly out.
Well, you remember I hunt the opposite side of 88
I was about to
where
say,
you guys are at.
You are familiar with the area because your hunting spot is literally the opposite side of the highway from us.
Yeah, the campground that's up there opposite the lake from where you guys are at, typically we'll head up there if we're up there for a long period of time. I don't know if they still have it because it's been a couple years since we've been up there, but we go up there. They have coin-operated showers and coin-operated laundry, so you could do your laundry and take a real shower. And so, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so they would do that minimum one time a summer up to 4 or 5. If they did it with any sort of regular frequency, it would have become like it would have been added to the camp's like itinerary of events.
Oh yeah,
because it was so cool to watch. But this is on a whole nother level because 5 o'clock Charlie is actively trying to bomb them. So,
and it's funny. I was trying to think about this. I'm not even really sure unless you've done the research. I was trying to identify what kind of aircraft that is, and I can come up with a few close what I think it is, but I'm not sure.
Why don't you? Once again, I have 20 tabs open. The odds that I know exactly what plane it is, I'm going to tell you, are very high. But what were some of the ones you came close with? Because I'm curious to know if you actually were able to guess it.
Well, based on appearance, you can't take sound because that sound is completely fake. There's no way in hell with that sputtering, coughing that aircraft would be able to stay airborne because the propeller's not rotating enough. But it looks like it could be a T-8 Texan that's been modified for the appearance that it is. Other than that, it could be something out of the Lockheed line, early Lockheed, but it's just so hard because you don't get a clear shot of it, especially with the cameras from the 1970s that gives you any hint.
Okay. So I do have some history on both that airplane and what 5 o'clock Charlie is based off of. Before I get to that, I'll just ask a general question. And I asked this already knowing my answer, which is no, but is 5 o'clock Charlie too ridiculous for the show? Or did it fit right into the... Absolutely. Okay, that's good. That's the right answer.
Yeah.
Ethan, what about you?
Oh, God. He like a glove.
So the reason I don't think that the 5 o'clock Charlie thing is too ridiculous is, one, militaries are weird, and they do weird stuff. I 100% can believe
that military.
Yeah, I can 100% believe that the North Koreans sent a pilot in a little prop plane with 2 cylinders misfiring to go drop a 50-kilogram bomb on an ammo dump randomly. Because if our military, arguably the best military in the world, logistically, training-wise, all that, does some of the weird, dumb shit they do, no offense to anyone who is or has served, but let's be honest, y'all do some crazy crap.
Yeah,
like I've seen a cargo plane through a canyon.
I've seen how you tankers decorate your shit, so let's not throw any stones. We all know.
I don't doubt that weird crap like this has happened. And in fact, it has, because 5 o'clock Charlie is based on real events. In the Korean War and in the Pacific War, the Marines and military forces in the theater came up with the nickname Bed Check Charlie or Washing Machine Charlie for these type of flights. They were basically, if they bombed a target, great. If they shot up some barracks, great. But most of their job is the Japanese employed this and the North Koreans employed this. They're just harassment flights. They'd fly in really, really late at night or very, very, very early in the morning just to force an alert, to force the gun crews to get out of bed, to force the base to go on alert so that soldiers couldn't get a full night's sleep. That's all these were, is just harassment flights. And they might machine gun up your depot, or they might drop a couple bombs and make small craters on your runway if you're an airfield. But the main purpose of these flights was harassment, basically.
I love how they think American soldiers get a full night's sleep.
Well, yeah, but But there is some logic there. There is some logic psychologically to having enemy air cover bother you every day, even if you're not scared of it. Like clearly the MASH isn't. If this was happening at 2 a.m. every night and they had to go, go full air raid procedure, the doctors would eventually. We see in the future the doctors not getting enough sleep is already a factor. If you pile on top of that, it makes sense, but of course it's MASH, so they're doing it in the middle of the day in the worst airplane possible to do it in. Some other history is the North Koreans used a rather well-known plane. If you're into military history, this is not the airplane they used in the show, but the airplane that was typically used for these missions is the Polikarpov Po-2, which is a large biplane that was used as a bomber by the Soviets in the Second World War. And I use that term bomber loosely. It is one of the most mass-produced aircraft with over 40,000 airframes being built, but it is this plane would get outmatched by a well-seasoned butterfly. These are not good airplanes, but they were very useful because they had such a large biplane wing that they could travel at very, very low speeds and still maintain lift, which is why, fun World War II fact, one of many for this episode, the Po-2 biplane was used by a squadron in Russia called the Night Witches, an all-female bomber group that their specialty was night raids, and they would fly up to the German lines, cut their engines, and glide bomb the Germans, and you could not hear them coming. So the German soldiers were terrified. The German soldiers were terrified of these women in these planes. And the crappy thing is they eventually got to know their routine well enough that as soon as dawn light broke, the Germans would send every fighter they had after them. So it was a dangerous mission for those ladies, which, yeah, the Soviet armed forces in World War II are not, there are so many ridiculous stories of stuff they did. But in the show, the T-8 Texan was a good guess because it was a trainer plane for the Navy and the Army. The actual aircraft is a Ryan PT-22 trainer, so that's why it's two-seated, repainted in North Korean livery. And the pilot they hired to fly the plane had never flown the PT-22 before, so they had the owner of the plane fly it, which is why in some of the shots you see a pilot in the front that throws the bomb. You can actually see the owner of the plane, Don Burkett, hunched down in the second pilot seat. That little lump you see is him hunched down, controlling the airplane so that they can get the shot.
Yeah, you can, can't you?
Yep.
Okay, not a MASH prop, but kind of an adjacent MASH bit of history. Don Burkett, this episode came out in September. In the October edition of Private Pilot magazine, he did a write-up article about working with the show with his aircraft. So that would be if someone has the old Private Pilot magazine from the 70s, that would be a cool article to get if you were into aviation and MASH, that would be a neat little, again, a very niche little bit of MASH history, but still pretty cool. Something I noticed on my second watch through today of the episode, because of how filming works, they really only got one day of filming with the aircraft. So a lot of the shots you see are spread out over the course of multiple days in the show, but it's one day of filming. So you'll notice in some of the background shots, General Clayton's Jeep is already parked there, among other things. But yeah, fun little fact there. Yeah, so 5 o'clock Charlie comes in. He chucks a bomb at the side of the airplane, misses completely, which apparently, again, this is the 6th straight week that he's done this. And we come to find out that the thing they've been betting on is how far away from the ammo dump his bomb lands, which, this is perfect. I love this so much. Part of me is like, man, would they really? Yes, after 6 weeks of this,
yes, they would.
100% they would be betting on this. And Frank even complains about it in the future. No one betted on the Battle of Britain. Frank, no, I'm sure some sadistic fuck somewhere were betting how many German plane bombers will we shoot down today? How many want like people will bet on anything if they are bored enough.
Well,
But
you know the patron saint of cigars likely was betting on it.
yeah. Yeah. So
Jared and I had a running bet of how many times Cisco would get stuck or run late one summer.
that's right. Yeah. So yeah, no one could have bet on them busting an oil pan in the middle of camp, though. Yeah, our food truck that delivered into camp every week. No matter how many times we asked for a short wheelbase box truck, they'd always send an articulated 18-wheeler.
A 53-footer?
Yep. And all
Wow.
it took was one unexperienced driver.
That is not a vehicle that should be going up those roads.
Now,
No.
Here's the thing. If you have an experienced driver, they can do it. It's going to take them some time, but they can do it. They should just send the box van because we don't need an entire tractor trailer's worth of food. However, they got the one inexperienced driver that one time, and I love Ethan called it. Ethan was watching him pull the truck, and literally seconds before it happened. What'd you say, Ethan?
You know, if he keeps going over that rock, he's going to drop down and bust his oil pan.
And literally seconds later, wham! 20 quarts of engine oil in the middle of the El Dorado National Forest. And that truck sat there for 3 days.
This guy was furious when I climbed up on his passenger side and started tapping on his window because he didn't realize he'd done anything. He just thought some dipshit was trying to talk to him in his
because if he doesn't kill his motor,
if
he doesn't kill his motor, he's gonna have a lot more problems than a cracked oil pan in about a minute and a half.
Yeah,
and that's if he's lucky.
He kept his job.
Look, he's not working for Swift, okay?
Hey, there you go. So, as Hawkeye and Trapper say, everyone goes and retires to the digs because they're nearly out of plasma. I love the way that line's delivered.
Anthony,
yes.
Did I miss something? I just noticed this now in rewatching it with you the third time today, or the second time today. It looked like Trapper dyed it red in the swamp, and it's clear out here.
Dyed what red?
Dyed the. He looked like he was adding. Oh no, he must have been adding vermouth to it then.
Maybe. I know what you're talking about because that's something they've done in the future. Ethan, I'm just going to tell you this now.
No spoiler alerts because
spoilers?
I left the biggest spoiler alert for Ethan out.
Fair, you did.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, guys.
No, so he pours it into the thermos, and he does have a bottle of what looks like vermouth. So he is making. He's not following Hawkeye's recommended recipe though, which is one of my favorite lines of the show, and I forget it happens in like the first or second episode. It's pour 6 jiggers of gin while staring at Lorenzo Schwartz, the inventor of vermouth, for the driest martini. I kind of want that if there's ever someone making like a cocktails of film and stage, I want that to be one of the recipes is the driest martini, 6 jiggers of gin staring.
You do work for a guy. You know this can be done.
I do. I would. That's another one of those. I'd put that up in my bar or my kitchen, like the dry, like a little like nice little like recipe leaflet on a sign that says the driest martini and have it like in Radar's typewriter font, and no one would get it except the people that do, and those are the only people that matter. But so yeah, Charlie is flying off. They wait for the results of the pool. We then pop into, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't message a lot of people's favorite line from this episode. Nurse, you're out of uniform. Where? How about my tent in 5 minutes? Oh, Hawkeye. Oh, Hawkeye.
Try getting away with that now, but anyway.
God, no. Eventually, we're going to have an episode discussing, could you make MASH today?
They are going to try. I guarantee they are going to try.
So here's the thing. The fact that no one has yet tells me something about this show. I think that's a conversation for a future episode, but yeah. So
I'm
we
just looking at props. Back to that prop conversation. Henry's diploma from the scene.
Henry's
Ooh.
diploma would be a cool one. Yeah. Really anything hanging on the walls of the office, but I believe most of the art you see on the walls are from McLean's actual kids. So I wouldn't want to
believe
take
that.
any of those, but the skeleton would be interesting for several reasons. There's your little kimono doll. I love it. I love it. So Frank is complaining to Henry that 5 o'clock Charlie being allowed to accost the camp unopposed is unacceptable, which I kind of see Frank's point, but also I'm sure the army has looked at it and gone, this dude's an idiot, we're fine. But Frank keeps harping on about how we need to defend our skies, we need to, support what Billy Mitchell believed, that we need a strong Air Force. And forgive me, gentlemen, this led me down another rabbit hole. Because Frank brings up...
You got to... There's a lot of people that the Billy Mitchell reference probably went over their heads because they don't really know who he is and what he did.
Yeah, so hence why I wanted to take a moment and discuss very, hopefully briefly, but you guys know me. Billy Mitchell. If you don't know who Billy Mitchell is and you are a fan of military history, especially military aviation history, you need to look up Billy Mitchell. What Frank says is essentially correct. Billy Mitchell is known as the father of the Air Force. He served in the Army. He served in World War I in the Air Corps, realized the necessity of having a strong Air Force. That's not a hyperbole on Frank's part. And he would go on through the 20s and 30s to be a thorn in the Army and Navy side to the point of nearly being court-martialed.
Wow.
Because he strongly believed in building up the country's Air Force training, and he demonstrated they through war reparations got a hold of an old German battleship post World War I, and he demonstrated in a series of tests that large capital ships were under extreme threat by coordinated airstrike. And no one believed him, which, if you know anything about World War II history, he was right, like a lot.
The Bismarck comes to mind.
Pearl Harbor comes to mind. The entire Pacific War comes to mind. There's a reason there's a reason the United States Navy has something like 38 carriers and no large capital ships other than that. Like, it's carriers and destroyers and cruisers. There's no battleships anymore, and there's a reason, because they're a big target for airplanes. But yeah, read up on Billy Mitchell. He is a fascinating dude, and he irritated a lot of people, as a lot of people who are usually right do in history. He very, very much proposed a strong Air Force, and he unfortunately wouldn't see himself proven right because he passed away in 1936. But there was a lot of attempts to give him posthumous promotions in early 1940s because people realized they went back to a lot of his ideas and teachings at the start of World War II after seeing how effective the Germans were with their Air Force and ground forces working together. So
I know you wanted to keep it brief, but is he, I don't know if you've researched this, is he related to the General Mitchell that led the B-25 raid over Tokyo?
I did not delve into that very deeply. I know that the B-25 Mitchells, the bombers they used, are named after him. That's how they got their operational name. I don't know. Did he even have? Let me see if he had kids. And if here's the nice thing about editing, I can get rid of all of this if we need to. Because I know Doolittle was the colonel in charge of the raid, but the person above him, was. I don't think he was. No.
It was Doolittle. I'm thinking of the wrong person, but yeah, you know what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
no
no,
relation.
that would be a no.
The only relation was that the B-25 Mitchell bomber was named after Billy Mitchell.
Yeah.
But yeah, huge. Yeah, just the reason we have an Air Force is Billy Mitchell. Long story short. So Frank is right, but there is an even deeper layer of down the rabbit hole with Billy Mitchell and MASH. Frank is correct that he was played by Gary Cooper in the movie. Hang on, I have the name of it here. Hold. 1955. The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell, where he played Colonel Billy Mitchell. The director of that movie was a gentleman by the name of Otto Preminger. Otto Preminger's little brother is Ingo Preminger, the producer of MASH the Motion Picture. So, yeah, just down the rabbit hole I went, and I just resurfaced today. So yeah, there you go, fun times. So Frank is insistent that they need to call General Clayton and request anti-aircraft gun to defend the camp. He then quotes, since we're on the military aviation history, he then quotes, "He who controls the skies controls the war." Hermann Goering said that. Hermann Goering may have said that. He is not the one credited with the quote. Much like Billy Mitchell, the Italian army also had people who were screaming that they needed to increase their air force. The quote, "He who controls the skies controls the war," comes from General Giulio Duchette of the Italian army. And the only reason I bring him up is because he was a big proponent of strategic bombing. He is also credited with the idea in aviation warfare that the bomber will always get through, no matter what, which a lot of his teachings were used by the Allies in the strategic bombing of the Germans' industrial complexes. So yeah, air power wins wars, people. So Frank, as we have said so many times on the show, Frank, you're not wrong, you're just an asshole. Which brings back Ethan's favorite German phrase, which is
Voltersalbschurkeit.
Which I have learned is not a real German word.
Ah, well, real enough for me.
It's literally named after a character from a TV show named Walter.
Well, I don't care. Voltersalbschurkeit.
No, I don't care either. Voltersalbsch, whatever the word is one of my favorite phrases no matter what. But yeah. So yeah, military air history there for you, which, as I've warned on the show previously, do not get me started talking about World War II history. It is the only thing I can talk at length more than MASH about. So Frank's complaining. Henry has won the pool, by the way, with how many yards did he choose? Radar comes in and is screaming it. Is it like 75 and a half yards? Very, very nice, Henry. And I did want to take a moment. We're going to pause the MASH discussion for a second. As we stated earlier, Greg, you are a connoisseur of fine tobacco, are you not?
I am.
Specifically cigars. And I figured if we're going to have someone who is very knowledgeable about cigars on the show, I would like to transport myself back in time to teenage Anthony, who obviously was not a cigar smoker then, and have some of the questions that popped into my mind about cigars answered by someone who is familiar. I know the answers to these questions roughly now, but since you're here, for the pleasure of our viewing audience, I wanted to pose some questions to you that I had watching MASH, because we talked about this earlier. MASH weirdly has a lot of cigars in it, just in the background or in scenes. So a lot of these thoughts came up to me when I first watched through the series, because we see cigars in media a lot because they're kind of they've always been used as kind of like a status symbol thing. Like I specifically think of movies like The Godfather, or specifically mob movies come to mind. You always have the mafia boss smoking a big like Italian or Cuban cigar. But in MASH, it's different because we see almost everyone at some point smokes cigar, even Radar. So yeah. One of the questions I wanted to ask that had come to mind to me before I knew about cigars, why is Henry's cigar Army OD green? Why is that a thing?
It's funny you say that. So there, in the cigar world, And the terms I should start out in the beginning are relevant to the manufacturer because they can be shifted around depending on what they are, much like the size of the cigar. But there are several different color grades of wrapper leaves. What you see in this scene is you see a green one. That's called a candela. That's the lightest color that they make. They're also in order is the Claro, Colorado Claro, Colorado Maduro, and Oscuro being the darkest. It's the different shades from green to dark brown to nearly black. In this case, it is a candela. And when cigar tobacco is grown, it's green. When it's cut from the plant or primed, where they pull off the leaves that they want at a certain time for the flavor profile, they're then hung in a barn to dry. They retain their green color as long as they're left in the barn for a shorter period of time. Then they shift to brown, and then they're fermented. Oh, God, it just got bright. Then they get fermented, and they go into the different stages of all the way to black, if you will. So that's, in this case, we're seeing a wrapper on the cigar that is not aged long enough or longer than would normally be associated for what you see today. You also have to go back to the time period. You're talking the 70s. Cigars were very popular in the Victorian era through the early 20s, early 30s. They kind of fell out of favor, except for the ultra rich that can afford them through the Depression era. And then they came back into favor again, most notably with our one of our presidents, President Kennedy, being a fan of the Cuban cigars. So they started their comeback again. Back then, for the 70s era, a lot of your less expensive cigars that you would primarily see in a war zone, because it would be hard to get the higher end ones, were a green wrapper leaf. It's also a different flavor. It's a more grassy note in today versus the more rich, full flavor tobacco that you and I enjoy when we're on my podcast. So it does change that, but it really depends on that, because if you notice, not to be a spoiler for Ethan, but in later seasons, both Henry and the future commanding officer, Colonel Potter, are cigar smokers. They feature in a lot of the different episodes and scenes. So you also see Potter with the same thing. He's typically smoking a Candela cigar, unless you've got somebody like, is it Dangerous? Not Dangerous Dan. Help me out, Anthony. The pilot with diabetes.
Smilin' Jack.
Smilin' Jack. He has access to Tokyo, where he can get finer Cuban cigars, as our lovely Colonel Potter will say. Has access to higher grade cigars by going into Tokyo. So it just depends on what they're getting and where. The PX is obviously not going to carry the biggest one.
Because I always assumed, and again, this is young Anthony thinking this, like, wow, is that an Army issued cigar? Even the cigar is OD green. Okay, that's weird, but no, you're saying that it's green because it would have been the cheapest, more, I guess it's a kind of a double-edged sword. For the show, it's the cheapest they could get for props, because I'm sure there's 5 half-smoked cigars offset from the different takes. Because they had, I'm sure McLean Stevenson lit up like 6 of those cigars for various takes. But he does seem to be actually smoking it. But
what's the cardinal sin, Anthony, that he performs in this scene?
I did not watch his cigar smoking closely enough to.
He lights it with a Zippo.
Uh-huh.
That is like, you are going to hell, sir. There is nothing I can do. And for your audience, not that they want to know this fact, but the reason in the modern era where we're in now, Zippo lighter fluid, also known as Ronson fuel, has flavorings of sulfur and things like that in it. And that flavor of the burning of the fuel will translate into the foot of your cigar, and it makes it taste pretty bad. So that's why it's like, that's a sin. You don't do that. That's why the modern cigar lighters you see are all high quality, extremely purified torch fluid.
Yep. So Ethan, how are you doing over there, bud?
I just press my cigar against the car's engine block, and when it gets hot enough, I take a few puffs. Gets a real nice scent of oil in there.
Oh God,
if
you're
you
horrible.
If you haven't guessed, I have watched someone who shall remain nameless light their cigar with a Zippo lighter on many occasions.
Yeah, I bet they have. But, it's funny because there's a lot of things they do in this series that I, as a cigar smoker, just cringe at, like biting the end off the cigar and things like that. It's just like, why are you doing this?
Spitting the pigtail across the room. Yeah.
That's looking at it through the modern lens. That was popular back in the day. So, it's us looking at the lens of what the modern cigar industry has put out versus what would have happened in the 70s. Or in this case, the 50s.
But that goes back to something you guys say on your cigar podcast all the time is there might be ways that are less conventional to smoke your cigar, but if you enjoyed the cigar, everyone else can shut the fuck up. Like, pretty
much. Even if we will secretly point and laugh.
Yeah, but okay. So going back,
Speaking of, Anthony,
yes.
As you know from us talking about this episode from when you first started this podcast, I currently am smoking an El Redondo, the finest Cuban cigars rolled in Newark by Puerto Ricans.
Yes. All the MASH nerds out there are like, yes, good reference. Meanwhile, Ethan, confused and quiet in the corner.
He'll get there.
I've been confused most of my life. Trust me, it's nothing new.
Don't worry.
In reality, I have a beautiful Room 101 farce Maduro that's thoroughly enjoyable.
And Maduro, to put into context compared to what Maduro's the other end of that aging spectrum.
Correct. It's the darkest. This one's not a dark wrapper, but it's one of the darker shades of wrapper. It's a stronger flavor note, less sweet, more melancholy would be a good word to describe it. It's more earth tones and deeper, rich flavor. And I'll be honest with you, I've smoked cigars for years, as you know, and I am not a fan of the Candela wrapper, except in certain exceptions, because I don't like, if I want fresh cut grass clipping taste and smell, I'll freaking eat my lawn out front when I'm cutting it.
But that goes back to something I was going to mention is Henry's smoking a green cigar, a Candela cigar, for two reasons. One, it's what the prop department can get a lot of cheap, but also in the 50s in a MASH unit in Korea, probably what they could get their hands on easily and cheap. So
yes and no. I mean, Candela was very, very popular up until about the 50s, which would be about right for this time frame. It did fall out of favor, and then it's now coming back into favor with there's 7,000 cigar manufacturers out there now and growing, and Candela is really coming back into favor as a flavored note. So it's interesting how that comes full circle again.
Very nice. So, yeah, thank you for that. So, because that's, again, I've seen cigars in media and have grown up, because my dad, one of the other hosts on the Beyond the Humidor podcast, I've grown up with him smoking cigars, so I've like casually known some of the stuff, but just even in the time of me listening, not even helping with your guys' podcast, I've learned a bunch of cool stuff. So thank you for sharing some of that with the audience. And audience, if you smoke cigars and enjoy cigars, go check out the Beyond the Humidor podcast, because I will put links. Sometimes I even say ridiculous shit over there because I'm the camera guy. But,
Yeah.
It is a very good podcast.
Thank you.
You're just saying that.
If you're saying ridiculous shit, it's usually because we deserve it.
Yeah. I won't argue with that.
Mm-hmm.
So...
And there's that doll again.
So, cigar tangent over. Radar comes in with Henry's winnings. We get the he who controls the skies controls the war. Trapper and Hawkeye come in to congratulate Henry and also inform him that there will be a poker game where he and his money are most welcome. Frank insists on calling General Clayton, to which Radar in the background has been setting up the phone call. We also find out, and I love this, that the general is also calling in to place his bets each day for the the yardage. Like, I love how, like, yes, we'll give Frank his gun, but also can I please put in a bet for my space at the same time? After a little bit of waffling and the general putting in his 62-yard bet, Frank insists that Henry ask for an anti-aircraft gun, and again, this is one of those dumb little jokes that MASH throws in just because they can. Henry reads the manifest upside down, so he requests an 04WW Nug, which is, again, like so many of these little jokes, I have no words. I can't discuss it further. It's a great little gag. Moving on.
And well, even upside down, they get it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, even, but I mean, that goes to where if you actually said what it was upside down, the joke wouldn't be as funny because people would have to think about it too long.
True.
But if you just say, 04WW Nug, just rolls off the tongue and is quick enough that people get it before you move to the next thing. So I'm okay with that.
And then in true MASH fashion, you've got that phone floating around, everybody putting in their 2 cents, which we know in reality never would happen.
Oh no! Oh
Not
no!
without a court martial or 3.
I kind of some of these phone calls I would love to go back and edit so that you hear just what the general hears. Like specifically this phone call and the one from the end of season 1 where General Clayton's telling him about the ceasefire, and you hear, like, I'm sure Clayton heard, like, vague thank yous from Henry, lots of screaming in the background, and then all of a sudden, shuffling of the phone, General, I want to have your baby. Like, I would love to kind of go back and edit the phone call to be, what did the general hear? Because I'm sure it's even more ridiculous than what we're watching on screen. But so yeah, the argument ensues. Frank is desperately demanding that they need a gun. Hawkeye and Trapper vehemently opposing it. The general ultimately says, I will come up there and deal with this situation myself, which good on Clayton. Good leadership there. Like, no, I'm going to good on him. Fair to General Clayton. I'm not going to listen to either of you. I'm going to come up and make up my own mind. Cuz I don't trust that either of you are telling me the full truth, which yeah, probably not. Frank is storming out in a tiff yet again, claiming that someday all of Hawkeye's behavior and filthy language will come out, and it'll be a sad day for the U.S. Army when it does. And he wants everyone to understand that this is war, and war is a call to arms. And again, to Ethan's point earlier, why are you drawing your gun, Frank? Just for dramatic effect? Like, what? Frank, why do you do this to yourself?
And yet again, he's firing the damn thing because he's sending signals with the radar.
Yeah, he pulls it, looks at it, and squeezes it. Like, at least he took a moment to register that it was not a firearm before he did. Which, good. And I'm convinced, now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder, his holster's closed the whole time until he goes to reach for it. I kind of want to watch back the scene after we're done recording and see if you can see Trapper or Hawkeye lift his gun. It wouldn't surprise me a bit if they added that in there and we've just missed it. I don't think they do. I don't think they do, but I'm sure that's what happened in the universe of the show. Is while Frank is yelling at the general about the gun, Trapper or Hawkeye makes the swap, but. That is if Frank ever did get his gun back at any point in this episode. But Frank storms off, and we see General Clayton come into camp. He almost runs over Father Mulcahy, which is unfortunate. And we get another one of the cutesy little Father Mulcahy joke reads that I love. Bumps into the back of Father Mulcahy. He's like, oh, I'm terribly sorry, Padre. And William Christopher just turns around and goes, it's okay, General, I'll just turn the other cheek, and he walks off. Again, anytime they use Father Mulcahy for religious comedy, chef's kiss. I love it so much.
And then we get to my favorite part of most MASH episodes. Margaret and the generals.
Margaret and the general. Margaret calls General Clayton to her tent. The general runs in. Margaret, quickly, before word gets out I'm here. Goes for an embrace. To which Margaret has to go, oh, you know Major Burns, yes? Oh, of course. So they try to head the general off and say, hey, we, the majors, the higher ranking people, suggest that they're going to try to persuade you against the gun and, tell you that we don't need one, it's not necessary, but we think you should reconsider it. And General Clayton also has a point here where he's like, What are you doing? Be quiet. I'm a general. I get to decide what. Hush. Stop talking, Frank and Margaret.
And of all the generals that we see in season 1 and 2, I think this actor plays a general, what I would perceive as a general, the best. No one makes general's mind up for him. It's just the kind of piety that you get with that rank.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I like General Clayton. General Hammond is G. Woods' character is what he is. He's just kind of a placeholder for a couple episodes. I'm one of the few that liked General Barker. I think Ethan liked General Barker just because he was a boss hog. But yeah, General Clayton, Herb Voland as General Clayton is one of the better generals, I would say, of the series.
Yeah. And I think he sticks around the longest too.
I think he is one of the more regular recurring generals, because I know we get a bunch of one-off generals that come through the hospital, but he is by far the one that is most persistent. He tells Margaret that he would like to discuss this matter later, to which Frank chimes in, "Of course, sir," and he has to clarify it privately. Which, oh, Margaret, oh, Frank. We see that the general parks his Jeep, stating that it is a classic move to store your munitions and supplies next to hospitals so the enemy won't bomb it. We learned it from the Germans. Which, all right. We have them making the argument that, hey, yeah, you might shoot down Charlie, but all that's going to do is escalate a situation that really isn't that big of a deal. And it's not an unfair point that Hawkeye and Trapper make, that you're going to have real airplanes, real, like, Russian piloted MiGs and other bombers coming to destroy the camp and the ammo dump, which, for someone who has no interest in the military or anything of that nature, they're kind of right. Like, if the enemy's attack is not working, don't provoke them into, don't correct the enemy when he's making a mistake. I can't remember who that quote is attributed to, but I know that is a quote, and I think that they would be wise to follow it right now.
And I find it interesting, Anthony, in this scene, apparently Henry's cigar lasts 24 hours.
Apparently, he's smoking the same cigar for the entirety of the episode. Which, I mean, if only cigars lasted that long. And I'll be perfectly honest, have I smoked the same cigar once or twice over the course of more than a reasonable time frame? Yes.
Oh yeah.
But we're not gonna discuss that. Oh, while we were talking, I looked up "never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." That is attributed to French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. That I knew it was a notable person, so I wanted to look it up. But
good general.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, there's a new Netflix series out about him.
Yeah,
I'm curious if it's any good.
I think it's actually an Apple original series, which is the only reason I haven't watched it yet. But I've heard rave reviews.
The only concern I have about it is I think the total runtime is like maybe just shy of 3 hours. That is a lot of a person's life to tell in just 2.5 hours. But
yeah, you'd be hard pressed to tell a whole life story of a normal person in that amount of time, much less Napoleon.
But it looks really good. It makes, you know what it kind of makes it makes me want to go back and watch the old Waterloo movie, because that's really good. But anyway, that's again a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time.
But I digest.
No, you did. That's not all right. Anyway, moving on. 5 o'clock, Charlie returns. The gang takes cover behind a large rock, which I am determined to find that rock when we go out to the film site, because that will be a trip we make. Oh, there's no way they didn't get rid of that rock. Heck, there's a burned out Jeep on that site that might still be the same burned out Jeep. Who knows? But Charlie comes around, drops his bomb, and this is something that people like to point out. The Jeep was clearly destroyed before the bomb exploded, and the fire exploded out from under it. No shit, it's Hollywood. But the general's Jeep is destroyed. And I do kind of like that that's the thing that tips Clayton's scale to, yeah, you're getting the gun. Fuck that guy. That's such a realistic, like, yeah, everything you guys are saying makes sense, but fuck him in particular. I'm giving you a gun. We get our beautifully timed commercial break, and we're back to this scene. This scene, much like the scene from the last episode where they're all at breakfast and just being cringy as hell. Frank trying to be in command of armed troops is uncomfortable. Frank, you should not be given any sort of authority, but yet here you are. He has a detail of 3 South Korean army soldiers. I did, again, going down the rabbit hole as I do, I have some information on some of these actors. The gentleman who is the squad leader is an actor by the name of James Sato. You have 100% seen James Sato in a number of movies and TV shows. He is a lot of bit parts in a lot of crime shows, actually. He'll come in as a witness or as a reporting party or as a suspect in a lot of crime shows. He was the original Shredder in the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the voice of Shredder. And the thing that I most recently know him from is, I don't know if you guys get the same suggestions on your like Facebook that I do when I'm scrolling through, but a lot of people post like condensed versions of like crime shows. So like NCIS, Hawaii Five-0, Law and Order SVU, they'll just trim out the commercials and trim out like the dumb like character development for the detectives and just show you the progression of the actual detective work for that episode. They suck me in every time. I spent 2 hours watching condensed versions of NCIS last night. But one of the clips that came across just by coincidence in the last couple days was an episode of Hawaii Five-0 that James Sato was an actor in, and the plot of that episode was kind of cool. James played a character who was a child in one of the internment camps in Hawaii who saw his dad get murdered by a camp guard and tried to murder that camp guard in modern day at a World War II like commemoration thing. So there was a whole investigation of what happened back in the 40s and going to talk to veterans. It was kind of a cool episode, but yeah, that's James Sato. And then one of the other soldiers is Lloyd Keno. And the only reason I pull him up, what did I pull him up for? There was a specific thing that he did that I wanted to mention, and I can't find it anymore. Oh, of course. By coincidence, he's also plays a Japanese soldier and a veteran of the World War II in one of my other favorite World War II related episodes of a crime show. Do either of you watch NCIS or have watched NCIS?
Oh, of course.
Do you remember the episode where the Marine Corps vet comes in with his old Colt 45 and says, "Oh, I committed murder with that"?
Is that the one where he was the Medal of Honor?
Yeah, the Medal of Honor recipient guy.
Yes, yes.
I believe the gentleman closest to the camera in the squad, don't quote me on that, I can't quite tell based on the face. It's one of the other 2 soldiers is the actor who played the World War II Japanese veteran that they brought in to kind of do the mock battle scenario to jog his memory. So yeah, the MASH actors end up everywhere. So thank you for allowing me to go on a tangent of these fabulous background actors.
So can we go back to the firearm for a minute, because we're going to have something come
firearm.
up.
Please.
I'm watching it along with you, and you have not gotten to the part where Trapper, Radar, and Hawkeye show up, but in every scene, including where I have stopped to wait for you, Frank has his 1911 in his holster.
Okay, so he did find his gun at some point. Good.
Yes.
Thank you. Good, Frank.
I choose to believe he had to go to the armory and get a new pistol every single time. They just keep hiding it too well.
They just keep rotating it back through the armory, probably. So Frank says that he will be for the purposes of their demonstration, he will be the platoon commander. James Sato's character will be the platoon leader. The second man will be the squad leader, and the last man will be the squad. Which Frank, that's not how this would work, but okay. As he's getting ready to, well, Frank makes an ass of himself so unnecessarily. He explains that the enemy attacks foolishly, same time every day, with no element of surprise. The man does not possess an ounce of cleverness, and I'm going to argue this is the first little bit that we get of racist Frank. We haven't really gotten racist Frank yet, but this is the first drop of it. He says, and that shows you the limitations of Oriental thinking. Haha. Looks at James Sato. Long, awkward silence. Frank, why do you do this to yourself? I'm laughing. Obviously, it's not funny because Frank's being racist. It's funny that he gets caught immediately by the dude just looking at him like, what did you just say? And Frank has to like backpedal and just move on. No offense. I love how he just goes, no offense. Frank, why do you do this? And then
the single best gag in MASH to date.
I'm going to say something that only Ethan's going to get.
I know what you're going to say, or at least I have a good idea.
Staff flags.
Yep.
I think we've mentioned staff flags once in the podcast, but for those uninitiated, obviously at a Boy Scout summer camp, every morning and evening, colors. Flags go up in the morning, come down in the evening. That's also where the staff gives their daily announcements for what events are happening in camp, all that jazz. Every day, morning and afternoon, every day, every week of the entire summer, we do this. Until the last Sunday that we're taking down camp, where there are no scouts present. We still do flags. We still do a proper and respectful flag ceremony. But once those flags are down on Sunday evening, or Saturday evening, the Saturday after the last group of scouts has left, the gloves come off and people are allowed to make, as long as it is PG-13, we had to implement the PG-13 rule for reasons. It's no holds barred. You can come dressed in costume. You can make any announcement you want. You can rant about stuff that happened that summer. I think the first year that I did staff flags, I did an Arlie Ermy drill instructor impression and just roasted every single staff member on the rock. Yeah, it was a fun time. It was one of the most MASH-esque things we've ever done at camp, and I loved it.
For those in the audience who don't know what I look like, this won't be as good, but Anthony might recall, and Greg knows what I looked like. My last year, I went as a hula girl, complete with coconut bra and grass skirt.
Oh God!
Good times.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh yeah, we had everything from like someone was wearing a Soviet officer's cap like Scott has. There's people wearing their uniforms backwards. There were 2 older staff members were smoking cigars on the rock. Like definitely not stuff you would want to do at a normal day of camp. But yeah, it was a very nice way to cap off the summer, let that last little bit of steam pressure out of the safety valve, so to speak, and just have a good time as we finished putting away camp. And then people took it too far and it got ruined. So, want. But in the spirit of staff flags, we have Trapper, Hawkeye, and Radar marching out in uniform, quote unquote, to participate in Frank's drill. We have Trapper doing obviously a caricature of General MacArthur. We have Radar with a yardstick and an M2 helmet. And Hawkeye in his officer's dress tops, along with his beret, or not beret. I don't know what do you call that kind of crush cap. Thank you. And his 9-iron and a cravat. Yes, the cravat. Honestly, the cravat makes it. It sells it. Another thing that happens each week at camp is the staff marches. We march up onto the rock for flags. We march when we do the colors, and then we march off the rock after flags. And the gag is the march gets a little bit more ridiculous each time with different commands until Friday, where whoever is in charge of giving the commands just loses all semblance of control. And we do kind of like Hawkeye and Ray are doing. They'll say, left face march, and both the color guard and the staff will left face, and so now you have two groups of people walking the wrong ways. It's hard to explain, but easy if you've seen it to understand what I'm saying. But yeah, they're right facing, left facing, reverse facing, and they end up facing the wrong way. And to something Ethan said to me the other day, the fact that we did not somehow find a way to cut that out, face, into our staff marching routine is an opportunity lost. And I almost want to go back to camp to implement some of the goofiness in this scene, because it's just good physical comedy.
I would bet money that if we had a time machine and could go back to see what inspired all of the bullshit that we did during Flags, this would be a huge contributor. I
would love to go back in time, because the camp we worked at, Camp Winton, was founded in 1958 and has been in operation continuously since then, unless you count 2020 COVID, but we technically still did virtual stuff, whatever. I would love to know how many MASH references made it into camp in the 70s and 80s. I would love to know, because there's no way, I've drawn so many parallels between camp and MASH that there's no way that some of that got brought in. In fact, I think there's a MASH reference or two on one of the totems from that time period, but I don't remember what it was, and I wish I had a picture of it. But yeah, this scene makes me smile every time, not because it's funny, but because it does remind me a little bit of camp, and I do miss working at the camp. They come to attention, and again, one of my favorite jokes in season 2, count off. Are you one? Are you one?
Yes,
I am. Are you? That's not funny. Which again, MASH does this. That is what I would like to call a tasteful homosexual joke. I think that is a funny fucking joke if you get it. I love it so much. Are you one? Hawkeye leans on his 900. Yes, I am. Are you? That's not funny, because Radar's immediately uncomfortable. I love that so much. It's such a funny joke. But they count off. They're at ease. Frank is not impressed and says it ill behooves them, which I think I use the term ill behooves specifically because of this line. Frank thinks it's inappropriate to show a flippant attitude in front of our Korean allies. And again, Hawkeye points out, if you fire that gun at 5 o'clock Charlie, you are going to make this situation worse. And again, I think Hawkeye's right. There is no way that shooting at 5 o'clock Charlie does not show the enemy that the MASH unit is now armed and is more of a threat. So the fact that Frank isn't... This is one of the first notches in making Frank a little bit ridiculous, because that is such good common sense that it seems so ridiculous that he doesn't consider it. But I could go on about this scene for hours and hours. Do you gentlemen have anything else you want to point out while I get up and get a beverage?
They have not yet lifted his gun, so that's Hollywood magic.
Yeah, Greg, I'm glad you said that, because I was watching for it like a hawk after you brought it up the first time.
So that is absolutely Hollywood magic, because he had his 1911, and then all of a sudden it's a plunger, and that's one of my favorite lines. Flush him out of the sky.
Hey Frank, flush him out of the sky. So this episode, Ethan and I have been talking. Spoiler alert, audience. Ethan and I have been talking a lot about trying to get some merch, because Ethan, as you guys have seen from his Kimono Dragon sketch, Ethan's a bit of an artiste.
Oh, shucks.
And between him drawing and me doing graphic design, we have maybe 50 ideas for merch, some of which are sacrilege and probably shouldn't be made. But yes, they should. Can I spoil one of them that we have not said on the show, Ethan? Because I want to make it so badly.
Absolutely.
This is entirely Ethan's idea. He wants to take the Marilyn Monroe, the very famous upskirt draft pose, superimpose Loretta Swift's
please tell me. Oh, I was going somewhere else with that.
And have it say, "Oh, Frank."
I was thinking you were going to superimpose Klinger on that one.
Por qué no los dos?
We'll do a special run of Greg merch.
Just for Greg. The Just for Greg line.
Oh, trust
But
me, I have enough merch ideas for my own show.
I think this episode has given me like 12 merch ideas in the first 12 minutes of the show. So the boys march off. We then get a very interesting scene, and this is something MASH, again, a pro and con of the show is MASH tries little different things throughout the series. This is their first attempt at random man with guitar is in camp. This is the dentist Captain Phil Cordoza, played by Corey Fisher, and he's just kind of this little guitar-playing dentist that the guys are chatting with about this whole Frank and Gunn and 5 O'Clock Charlie conundrum. I kind of like this. I like, even though he's a one-off character, I kind of like this little interaction that they're talking about the goings on, the whatever the plot of the week is with someone who's not Henry or Radar, or you know what I mean? It's kind of nice that there's another member of camp that we're kind of getting the view of, even though he is a one-off random character. But,
well, and he also utters one of my favorite lines.
Ooh, which one's that? Because almost everything he says is kind of nice.
Hawkeye says, "Do you want a drink?" or something of that nature, and he's playing his guitar, and he says, "You know, when I left from the States, I promised my girl or wife I would not drink or date another woman." And you hear, "Give me a blast, but a short one. I got a date tonight."
It's so good. But there's that beat. The thing that makes it great is he says, you know, "I told my wife I would not have a drink or another woman until I got back." And there's that beat where Hawkeye and Trapper kind of reflect on themselves a little bit and go, "Oh, that's nice. Give me a blast." Just the timing is so good on the delivery from all parties involved. An interesting fact about Corey Fisher, which this will be fact number like 37 of damn, we should have watched the movie by now. In the movie, MASH the Motion Picture, Corey Fisher is the man playing the guitar accompaniment when they sing "Suicide is Painless." He is the Captain Banditti, I think is his name, something along those lines. If I can find it. Captain Bandini is the guy playing the guitar for the "Suicide is Painless" scene, which I point out because that's kind of the crux of, that's the intro for the show for all 11 seasons. Like, the song is so inexplicably tied to the movie and the TV show that, yeah. I don't know why they randomly chose to bring him in as this dentist, but maybe that's why. It's almost like they put him in as an Easter egg before like Easter eggs were a thing, but whatever. So they're chatting about Frank and his gun, and Captain Cordoza drops a little bit of wisdom, which I will argue, without getting too politically heated, is some wisdom we can take in almost any time in history, but especially modern times. People like Frank are indestructible, and they always have been. You can't fight them. It's like the saying, if you argue with a fool, he just brings you down to they bring you down to their level and beat you with experience. I kind of like his opinion that you can't beat Frank, so subvert Frank. You know, you gotta get rid of the carrot on the stick that Frank sees. I kind of like his weird 1950s hippie dentist wisdom that he dispenses. Because it is kind of true. People like Frank are genuine. You can't convince them, so you gotta fuck with them. The only thing that has ever taken me out of the scene is the little guitar lick he plays at the end. It seems very, I don't know. There's something about that guitar lick that doesn't fit the 50s in my mind, but I'm also an idiot, so what do I know?
All I know is that when I think of a dentist that would take a hit of Novocaine before giving it to me, it's this man.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, you're not wrong. I think he's my second favorite dentist that we see in the show. We've gotten two so far. We've gotten him, and then the guy who is trying to go home at the end of season 1 and ends up just fucking it up horribly.
I say that one. I was gonna say not Futterman, but that's a future episode.
Futterman's my favorite dentist because he just how can he not be?
Yes.
So we see Hawkeye and Trapper get an idea to subvert Frank's playtime. they requisition 4 dozen sheets from supply. Their reasoning is they've just met 4 dozen great girls. And the poor nurse who's running the supply shed, she's helpless to stop them. They request 18 gallons of mercurochrome, which is a red liquid that I believe is like similar to iodine. It's an antiseptic, if my research is correct. So they obviously are hatching some sort of scheme, and we get the shower scene where, again, one of the many interesting drinking innovations we see on this show, Hawkeye and Trapper are sharing a martini from an IV drip bottle, which
as you do.
I think this falls very firmly into the category of if it's stupid, but it works. It ain't stupid. But they realize that no matter how good their plan is, Frank and the universe can conspire against them, and he can get lucky. So they can't just help Charlie hit the ammo dump. They have to subvert Frank at the same time. They have to essentially, make their plan redundant. So we see them pack up. We see them get ready the next day. Radar sets the clock back by a half hour, and they get Nurse Ginger involved by very overtly stating she's doing the 4:30 feeding for a patient. And they successfully trick Frank so that he can't get out there ahead of Charlie. But of course, they can't hide the fact that Charlie has arrived. Frank, to his credit, comes to the realization of what's happened fairly quickly. So good on Frank. He goes sprinting out to his gun position. I've watched this scene over like 4 times in preparation for this. I don't think I can track with all the little jokes and gags that are happening in this scene. You have the Korean gun crew trying to follow everyone's instructions. Frank's trying to read out of the manual how to aim the gun. Trapper keeps handing him the manual back upside down. You've got Hawkeye and Trapper shouting out opposing numbers and confusing the gun crew. You have Charlie flying over, trying to hit the dump at the same time. You've got Henry being like the mediocre administrator he is, where he's like, Frank complains to him, this is sabotage, Henry. Oh, Frank, I think that's a little unfair. Like, everyone
and
is
now
just...
now the 72-hour cigar?
Yeah, we're up to a 72-hour cigar that Henry is smoking. Either that, or he is chain smoking one off the other of this box of Candelas he has. 5 o'clock, Charlie drops his bomb and hits the cesspool. They keep shouting out different numbers, and I don't know if it's by fate or by design that the gun ends up pointing where it does. I like to think it's a little of both. But
I've always wondered that, Anthony. Was it by faith or design that Frank blows up the ammo dump?
Because there's 2 ways you could look at it. Was it just by chance? Because no matter what, I think you can read it as Hawkeye realizes the gun's pointed at the ammo dump by the way he doubles down saying, "You heard him, soldier, fire," and preps and turns his head and covers his ears. There's 2 ways I read it. One, it happened by chance. Hawkeye realized it and even though the Korean soldier was going to point out, but he says, "But sir," he's clearly about to point out, like, "I'm pointed at the ammo dump," and Hawkeye encourages him to follow the order. Or Hawkeye and Trapper are intentionally giving low numbers to keep the gun barrel low. Either way, it doesn't matter because Frank blows up the ammo dump, which, of course he does, which also provides one of the other great line reads of this episode. Everyone just staring at the ammo dump exploding. Henry with his cigar in his mouth. "That was a hell of a shot, Frank." I love it. And Frank looks so dejected. There are a few times that I feel a little bad for Frank. This is one of them. He just looks so upset.
And then I think, as you pointed out earlier on the intro of 5 o'clock, Charlie, I think it's also one of the best exits of a character in the whole series itself.
Yes. And there he goes, folks, flying the blue lady of the skies into the sunset. We say, aloha, 5 o'clock, Charlie, and return to our duties. Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, that's the end of that. I love the let me remind you, the hospital is open 24 hours for your dining and dancing pleasure. Which I'm pretty sure for the first, like, the whole 3 days we had a working PA system, I'm pretty sure one of the times that I had to make an announcement over it, I ended it with, as always, the Winton Lodge is open for your dining and dancing pleasure. No, I remember where it was. I did it at camp, but I also did it at, when I worked at Grocery Outlet, I would work the closing shift, and you have to do the, attention Grocery Outlet shoppers. The time is 9 p.m. and the Grocery Outlet is closing. We ask that you please bring all your items up to the front so we can check you out as quickly as possible. As always, we'd like to thank you for shopping with us at Grocery Outlet. The store will be open tomorrow at 8 a.m. for your shopping and dancing pleasure. And people, you'd hear people giggle throughout the store. It's like, don't take life seriously, people. Have fun. But we see at the button scene for the episode, everyone's reading their papers, their medical notes. They realize it's been a few weeks since Charlie's been around. They kind of miss him. They ask Frank, "Are you still angry at us?" To which Frank responds in the affirmative. And they eventually get to Frank and say, "Hey, come on to the mess tent. Let's go get some food." And I love, even after this episode and this early in the show, Frank is still even though he's the antagonist, he's still kind of one of the guys. Because even he looks at them and says, "How can I stay mad at you two?" Like, there's this weird, we're entering the weird, like, gray area of, is Frank a friend or an enemy or both? I don't know. I kind of still like, yes, Frank is both for now. But as I've talked about on the show before, he does slowly become a caricature of just cartoon villain. But right now, he's still on that precipice, but more on that in future episodes. So, after much longer than I plan to be talking about this episode, we are at the end of 5 o'clock Charlie, and I will ask, what do you guys think of this episode? I again, knowing very well what the answer probably is.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Loved it. Favorite episode to date, hands down. When I think of what I personally believe MASH ought to be from what I know about the series and what it's trying to go for, it's this episode.
Yeah, I have to second that. I mean, this is by far in my top 5 for the entire series, and there's a reason why I'm guesting on this particular show, because it's one of my favorites. So, well, it is perfect.
I do have to point out, when we initially talked about you coming on for an episode, it's 5.5 years away still. We already know the 2 episodes back to back you are coming to guest on. Fade out, fade in. Because you are unabashedly, as I think a lot of MASH fans are, a big fan of one Charles Emerson Winchester III. and I will ask
no spoilers.
I will ask you, is it fate, coincidence, or planning that you also are guesting on a show with the second most prominent Charles in the entire series? Is it just coincidence, or was this planned?
It could be both. Who knows?
Why not? Yeah, I would love to give some sort of like deep, nuanced retrospective on this episode. It's just a good, funny episode. There's no other way to like get around it. Like, what do you want us to say? It's funny. Hawkeye and Trapper are working great in this episode. Frank and Larry Linville in particular is great in this episode. McLean Stevenson as Henry is great. Margaret and Radar get their little moments. Bill Christopher gets a couple little moments. Something I did forget to mention, and it would be, again, mortal sin of the MASH world, even though I can't find where he is. I know he's in the background. I can't find the specific shot. We talked last week that we have Kelly Yamato appearing in the background now, and she appears in the background of this as Nurse Kelly. We have Roy Goldman, who we see throughout the series, is in the background, but we get our first background appearance of Corporal Igor Straminsky, played by Jeff Maxwell, who is, by coincidence, a co-host of another MASH podcast called MASH Matters. I can't find where in the episode he shows up. It's got to be in one of the crowd scenes when Charlie is bombing, but he will be a frequently recurring extra character as we go through the MASH series. He's in 83 episodes, so we will be seeing him again. I'm not gonna spoil this. I'm sorry, not gonna. I'm gonna spoil this right off the bat. This is to date the most audience feedback we've gotten on an episode, and there is no way in the world I'm going to be able to read every single person's feedback. I will read ones that are interesting and pertinent, but based on the scores I'm looking at, I think everyone's in agreement this is a good episode. But before we read the audience ones, Ethan and Greg, what would you rate 5 O'Clock Charlie on a scale of 0 to 5?
Greg, after
Solid
you.
5. Solid 5.
Yeah.
This is the essential 5 episode.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that even a little bit. Ethan, what about you?
Oh yeah, right there. A solid 5. Even if I wasn't gonna go with a solid 5 and say 4.9, I could only think of 1 or 2 things I could possibly nitpick about it, but I'm just not going to. Trapper gets to lead on some jokes. It's a good plot. It's funny. 5, period.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I had 5 written down for this episode like 6 months ago when I had the season 2 chart set up and ready. I'm just gonna fill this in now. No need to wait. Yeah, it's probably one of the best comedy episodes they ever did. Purely funny episodes they did. I'll ask the question because it came up last week. Is this episode better than Tuttle?
In my opinion.
Okay. Greg?
No.
No. Okay.
I happen to enjoy Tuttle thoroughly. I think it's one of the funniest bait and switch episodes in any series I've ever seen. So no, Tuttle ranks in my top 10 of the series as a whole. So, no, these two sit equal for me.
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. Good. I don't know if you heard my Tuttle rant last week.
I didn't, if you want to know the truth.
I will say this. Tuttle, I'll repeat what I said last time without going into the whole diatribe I went into. Tuttle is a great episode. And I'll spoil this part of the conversation for you before, and you can go and listen to it later. Tuttle is based on IMDb rating, it is the second highest rated episode of all 251 episodes, which Tuttle is a good episode. I don't know if it's second out of 251.
It's not, but
Okay.
that's a poll, and that's a pool of opinion, and you never know what that's going to be.
Exactly. Speaking of pools of opinion, let's go to the pool of opinion. I'm gonna speed through these because, like I said, this is triple the amount of the next highest amount of responses we've gotten. So I'm just gonna power through them. MASH fans 716, 5 out of 5. Episode has it all. Frank's paranoia. Hawkeye and Trapper working to stop him. A nearsighted pilot who makes Mr. Magoo look normal. cameos from Kelly, Igor, Roy, and Dennis. Great dialogue and setup. Perfect timing. Classic fun time. This lightsaber kills fascists. 5 out of 5. Truly iconic episode, showing what the show could be and how it could be hilariously skewer the conventions of war and authority. Laugh out loud funny. We got a 4.75 from Donut Eater. Chief Smash 5 out of 5. Gonna have to agree with the crowd. Great MASH episode, classic MASH episode. Hawkeye and Trapper in their dapper attire is iconic. I don't think I'm gonna surprise anyone. 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5. We have one 3.5 out of 5. Just not. Person said it's really good, just not 100% in their wheelhouse. Which okay.
That's fair.
I will say we did have one person on Instagram who said, kind of like how I feel about Tuttle and a couple of the episodes people really fawn over. they felt the same way about 5 O'Clock Charlie. They said, this is not one of the episodes I enjoy. I think it's too goofy. That's fair. Honestly, I could see how someone would not like it. It is one out of the almost 30 responses we got, so I think, I hate to tell you, you're in the minority there, but, yeah, so I think everyone is more than a little bit on the same page with this. So yeah, that was 5 O'Clock Charlie. We talked for an exorbitant amount of time, but I kind of figured between Greg and I and Ethan that was going to happen. So there you go. Enjoy this very long episode. And for an episode that deserved the amount of time we spent on it, to be honest, there was some good little stuff to dig into. But is there anything else you guys want to say about MASH or 5 O'Clock Charlie before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
Excellent.
Gregory,
would you like to tell the fine people of the MASH world where they can find you and the Cigar podcast?
Oh, okay. If you want a shameless plug, yes.
Shameless plug.
So the Beyond the Humidor podcast is searchable on all your favorite podcast platforms, particularly Apple, Google, and the rest. We also appear on YouTube. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Luma Cigar Cartel, that is our parent group that runs the podcast. Also, please don't forget my wonderful hosts on the Best Care Anywhere podcast. Like, share, subscribe, and listen wherever that platform is available.
And I will add the caveat for, even if you're not a cigar smoker, go check out some episodes of Beyond the Humidor, because as the title implies, it's not just cigars. It's three guys just shooting the shit like they would in a bar or a cigar lounge or at a barbecue or whatever. It just so happens
if you want to hear shameless bullshit, we got it.
Oh yeah. But they also have some very good insight into cigars and the cigar community, along with all the other ridiculous crap they talk about. It feels weirdly, it feels like the kind of podcast that you'd think the guys in the swamp would put on. Like if they did a medical podcast, they're going to talk about medical stuff, but they're also going to talk about all the crap they pulled on Frank, what Henry's doing, who's dating who. They're going to talk about the main topic, but they're also going to talk about all the bullshit, and that's kind of what Beyond the Humidor does. So go check them out.
It's also chock full of some of the best storytellers that I've personally ever heard or probably ever will hear. So you can't go wrong.
Thank you.
Wait, I hear Scott's ego inflating. No.
Don't forget your fathers, too.
Yeah, I know. But audience, if you go listen to that podcast and hear my dad tell stories, you'll understand why I talk for so goddamn long on the show.
Yeah, definitely. Go look for a show called Myths and Badgers. It's in the 40s era of the episodes. It's one of the funniest stories that your father can tell.
Good Lord. I'm sure we'll find an excuse to share it on this podcast at some point.
Very likely.
Anyway. Greg, thank you for coming on. I know life's a bit busy right now. There's stuff going on, but we appreciate you coming on. I'm glad we could have you on to talk about some MASH. And again, open invitation, if you know we have an episode coming up that you feel passionately about, please scream it from the heavens and let us know so we can have you back.
That's a lot. I might become a very annoying recurring guest.
Oh, no. Don't worry. Ethan and I are the filters. We get to decide if you actually come on. But
Good.
All right.
Well, we need to get Ethan on my program, too, as well.
Oh, anytime. Really, I would love nothing more.
We can arrange that.
The name of that episode, Kansas, Why It Sucks, Volume 1.
In the beginning.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you if you made it through this, what's Craig telling me, this damn near 3-hour recording I'm going to have to somehow cut down into a length of time people want to listen to. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye, everybody.
And so, as he flies the blue lady of the skies into the sunset, we say aloha, 5 o'clock, Charlie, and return to our duties. Let me remind you, the hospital is open 24 hours for your dining and dancing pleasure.